Welcome into another episode of Patrick Jones Baseball. In today's episode, we are talking everything bat speed. All right. We're talking everything bat speed. It's the off season, right? It's about getting bigger, faster, stronger. We want to be able to hit bombs next season. And so you see a lot more online bat speed training, bat speed this and the importance of bat speed. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to dig up some old notes here. I'm going to go and do some research. I'm going to talk to some people, and we're going to do an episode on bat speed today. All right. So by the end of this episode, you're going to be able to decide for yourself how important bat speed is in regards to hitting development, because you see two sides online. You see one side of people online where it's, geez, bat speed's everything, right? I mean, how could you not ever focus on bat speed? You should focus on it all the time because it's everything. And if you don't have high bat speed, you're not going to be a good hitter. And the higher bat speed you have, the better hitter you automatically become. And then there's the other side where it's bat speed's overrated. You don't need high bat speed to be a good hitter. And so it can be a little bit confusing. So I think after today's episode, you'll be in a position where you can make that decision for yourself. And that's my goal for today's episode. So first things first, we need to define bat speed, right? Because it's actually a little bit more complicated than you think. When you talk about bat speed, it can feel like, well, isn't it just how fast the bat is moving at impact? And you could say, yeah, but it also depends on how you're measuring it, right? What exactly are we measuring on the bat? Are we just measuring the entire bat, or are we measuring a specific part of the bat? And so what we're going to do is we're going to, just for today's discussion, we're going to define it the same way that some pieces of technology define it too. We're going to define it as the point on the bat that's 6 inches from the end of the bat. All right, so not where the handle is, but the end of the bat, 6 inches from the top of the bat, and that's right around that barrel area, right? So think about that barrel, those few inches that where the barrel is at. That's how we're going to find it. So those few inches at contact with the ball. That's how we're going to define bat speed for today. And so now that we have the definition, it's like, okay, how do we actually go about measuring? Like what is the measure? How do you actually measure the bat speed? Like how do these companies do it? How can you do it or I do it? And do you actually need to know the exact formula? Of course, you don't need to know the formula, but I know that there's some people listening to this that probably do want to know the formula. So here it is. I'm going to give it to you. Okay. So we're measuring angular speed because, angular speed is, that's what you use to measure something when it rotates. And so the formula for bat speed in a simple version is, bat speed is equal to angular speed times radius times conversion factor. And so angular speed is how quickly the bat rotates, and you measure that in radians per second. And then the radius is the distance from the bat's knob, which is the rotation point, to the point of impact. You measure that in feet. And then lastly, the conversion factor, and that changes the angular speed from radians per second to miles per hour. And so, an example would be, let's say a bat is rotating at 52 radians per second, and the sweet spot is 27 inches, which would be 2.25 feet from the knob. And so you can use that formula, and it would be 52 radians per second times 2.25 feet times the conversion factor, and you would get 81.9 miles per hour. Now, that may seem like a lot of overblown formula, overblown metrics and measurables and too complicated. Completely get it, but wanted to give that insight for those who do want to know. And all this will be in the show notes too, if you do want to read more about it. So now that we have the definition of bat speed, we know about, okay, like how it's measured, where it's measured on the bat, the formula that it's used. Now let's talk about, what actually impacts bat speed. Okay. And I think that the first one is the most common one, where be like, well, of course that impacts bat speed, but we got to always take it into consideration, and that's timing. And I'll give you a story here. So I worked with a player a little while back, and before the player came in for an assessment, I looked him up online, saw he went to a showcase, and saw at this showcase that his bat speed it topped out in the 80s. And so I'm thinking, man, that's pretty impressive. And so They use the blast motion bat sensor for the bat speed testing at this showcase. And so he came into the to my facility where I'm doing this podcast at, and I had him on blast motion, and I'm like, man, his bat speed was between 60 and 65 miles an hour. It's like that's 15 to 20 mile an hour difference. And so I'm thinking, is this blast sensor right? Oh, we got another blast sensor. Let me try that one on. So we changed blast sensors, and yeah, it was definitely right. Did the showcase use a bad sensor? What was going on? So I went back and watched the video again of this player in the showcase. Every ball that he had hit was way out in front of home plate, right? It was a showcase. He was trying to pull every single ball. So it was way out in front of home plate. And so that's a good reminder to everyone out there. That's why it's important to always make sure that you pair any piece of technology, metric, all that. There's context to it. You can't just solely take one number and paint a picture with it. And so you got to pair video with it. You got to pair, the location of the pitch, so that, timing, everything takes into account. And so that's one way that timing plays a part in it. The next thing is grip, right? Grip plays an impact into your actual bat speed. And if you go up there, and if you don't believe me, try this yourself. You go grip the bat as hard as you possibly can and try to swing it. Your bat speed's not going to be as high because your muscles are so tight that they're not going to be fast. And so like grip plays a part in it. There was a study done on choking up, and what it did is that this particular study is it took over 20 hitters. I believe it was 24 hitters to be exact. And so it had, half the hitters choking up on the bat, and then half the hitters not choking up on the bat. And then it's like, okay, like what's the difference? What's the difference between, the time to contact? So how quick they were to the ball, what's the difference between their bat speed? And so what they found is what you would probably guess anyway, is they were quicker to the ball. All right. They were quicker to the ball when they were choking up. So their time to contact did go down. Their barrels, like how often they were able to barrel the ball, actually it didn't have any impact at all, which you may think is surprising. And then lastly, their bat speed went down on average about 10% when they choked up on the bat versus when they had a regular grip right on top of the knob. So that's anytime I'm reading a study online about anybody, there's context to it, right? We don't know the actual players. We don't always know, we know the environment, but it's a small sample size, of course, but it is a sample size, if nothing else. So, and I think just reading through this study, and again, all of these will be linked in the show notes if you want to read more. It is, it's not surprising, I guess, to say. Now, you could say like, man, geez, Barry Bonds choked up. What about Barry Bonds? Yeah, he choked up, and there's some really good hitters who choke up. And I would say, isn't that crazy to think about if Barry Bonds had another 10% of bat speed that he left on the table by choking up? I wouldn't recommend Barry Bonds not choke up, comparing, what the career he had. At the end of the day, it is about barreling the baseball. And so for some players, hey, they will take away a little bit of bat speed and choke up a little bit. And if that makes you feel more confident, by all means, let's do it. But based upon this study, 10% decrease in bat speed when players choked up versus when they didn't. So that's pretty interesting to note. Another study, and again, I'm going to go through a couple different studies. I think it's important to put information out there, and you can make your own mind up in terms of what you want to take and apply with your own hitters. But this next study is talked about muscle. It measured how thick a player's muscle was, and then compared it to their bat speed. And so it measured the muscles and then the trunk, right? Their abs and then it measured their upper limb muscles, so their elbows and forearm muscles. And then lastly, it measured their lower limb muscles and went down to their ankles and knees and things of that sort. And what was interesting about this study, which I think is something I do want to note, because you see sometimes with bat speed training that you should swing and train on both sides as a hitter. So if I'm a right-handed hitter, they would say like also train your non-dominant side too. So swing left-handed as well as right-handed. And that's going to help supposedly increase your your bat speed on the right-handed side. Well, this study came out and said that there's no significant relationship between lateral asymmetry of trunk muscles, thickness, and bat speed. So essentially, it's saying that just because your muscles are stronger on one side and not as strong as the other doesn't mean that your bat speed is going to be any different if you trained on the opposite side. So it's saying it's pretty much a waste of time if you're training specifically for bat speed. If you're there now, there's other ways to that maybe swinging on your non-dominant side may help you, but if your solely focus is to increase bat speed on your dominant side, trying to train the non-dominant side too is not a smart use of your time. It's not going to make much impact. And so what they lastly found in that study was the muscle thickness in the abs and lower back on the dominant side played a bigger part in bat speed than all the other areas tested. But I would like to note that they did not measure muscle thickness in the glutes or quads or anything like that, which I thought was interesting. I'm surprised they didn't. But so that was from that study. The biggest takeaway was when you're training bat speed, don't worry about training the non-dominant side. If you want to train the non-dominant side for other reasons that may help you with hitting, by all means, but it's not going to help you on the dominant side. Next thing we're going to talk about is the on-deck routine, which I think is something that we've seen over the course of years for hitters. Usually you watch hitters on deck and they have some sort of donut on their bat or weight or, one of those really heavy weights that they're swinging around. And I did this a lot as a player, and, it makes sense, right? You swing something a lot heavier. When you pick up your regular bat, it's going to feel a lot lighter. You're going to be able to swing it a lot faster, feel more confident. And we've known this for a while. I don't know if you remember this back in the day of the ESPN had that sports science show, and they did the study on bat speed. When a player had a donut on their bat, took the donut off and then swung and then did it without the donut. And, their bat speed went down when they warmed up with the donut on versus not having it on. But you still see players doing it all the time. And I think that's something that, when you have a habit like that at a young age, it's very hard to break the older that you get. I think that's one of the reasons. And I think the second reason is there's an art to hitting. There's an art to hitting, and if a player thinks that something, feels lighter and now they're more confident stepping up in the box against a pitcher, then there's maybe some truth to that too. And so that's something that, again, we have to take into consideration when it comes to on deck. But ideally, in the on deck circle, you don't want to be swinging a very heavy bat and then picking up your gamer and then going up to the plate, because your bat speed will decrease a little bit. And so that's something to note. There's some studies that have been done on that. Various percentages between, I want to say 12%, anything above 12% or below 12% underload of your regular game bat will decrease your bat speed on the on deck circle. That was one of the studies that I read. I had Liam Mucklow on the show probably over a year ago, and for him, by the way, he's one of the founders at Baseball Performance Lab down at Marucci. And one of the things that he had talked about is, hey, in an ideal world on the on-deck circle, if I could pick anything I wanted to, we want to make sure those motor units are firing, the brain is primed for speed. And so what I would want to do is I would want a hitter to do a really heavy trap bar deadlift, 330 pounds, probably for 2 or 3 reps, and then grab a fungo and rip a few swings to really prime the body for speed then. So we're hitting both sides, and then grab your regular bat, head up to the plate. So that was what Liam recommended. And I don't know about anybody else, but I think it's probably pretty hard to have a trap bar on the on deck circle, 330 pounds, maybe in the hole or something of that in that regards. But I thought that was pretty cool and wanted to share that with you as well. One of the things that you'll hear too is, for bat speed, and this is something that I did religiously growing up, is grip and forearm strength. If you want to increase your bat speed, it's all the grip, right? It's all wrist strength. And I want you to think about it in 2 different ways. Okay. Think about it as driving a car. So if you're driving a car, say you're driving a Ferrari, right? And like, man, you have this incredible engine. It's, you can go so fast on it. It can stop on a dime, do all these things. but your steering wheel doesn't work very well. Like there's something a little bit off on it. And before you know, like you don't know what direction this car's going with this incredible engine, and it's not that great to drive anymore, and it's not that effective because the steering wheel's off. That's the same concept with uh, hand and grip strength. It is important, right? It's very important, but it's definitely not the most important thing. And so think about it in that regard to the Ferrari, right? If you have an engine of Ferrari, but you have a bad steering wheel, not going to be that effective. So if you have, you're really strong in your core and, all of your body, but your wrists, maybe you have a wrist injury, your bat speed is, going to be affected, and you're not going to be able to hit for as much power. With that said, it's not important to make wrists and forearm strength the most important thing in training, because it doesn't have that great of an impact. It's important to be strong, but we don't focus too much time on it. And if you think about it, I mean, look how small your wrists are, right, compared to the rest of your body. To think that those solely are responsible for hitting a ball 400 plus feet against 98 miles an hour, that's hard to fathom. And so that's something that you also want to keep into consideration, when doing grip strength training. Like, yes, it is important, but it's not the end all be all. Bat speed training specifically. So a lot of the things that have been done on bat speed training is the overload, underload bat speed training. And I have several thoughts on this. So can it be effective? Yes, definitely it can work, but it's very similar to someone taking a supplement. Like say you're taking a protein supplement. Well, let's say I never work out and I'm taking a protein supplement, and someone else is working out and has a clean diet and everything, and they're taking a protein supplement. I'm probably not going to see that big of a difference because I'm not working out. Maybe I'm not eating clean either, versus this other person is they're working out regularly, they're eating clean, and plus they're doing this protein supplement too. They're probably going to see a little bit better of a difference and see more of an impact than someone like myself. And so the overload underload bat speed training is very similar too. Whereas if you solely just do overload underload bat speed training and nothing else, you're probably not going to see a ton of results. And that also goes down to even really young kids, right? Like pre-puberty kids doing a ton of bat speed training. I have a few thoughts on that. So yes, it is good to get them to swing fast and do all that. 100% agree. I want them swinging hard. From what I've seen, and again, it's not the biggest sample size in the world, so take it with a grain of salt. But I have seen a lot of kids who have had problems dumping the barrel, and so if you give them an overload bat, from what I've seen, has made the issue worse because they don't have the functional strength yet. That's what I've seen. I've seen other people who have said that it's helped younger players to give them an overload bat who do dump the barrel. So that, from what I've seen, I have to go by what my eyes tell me at the end of the day. For younger kids, I usually stray away from the overload underload bat speed training, just because they don't have the functional strength yet. I do want them to move fast, but you don't have to have overload underload bat speed weighted bats to do that, and to really emphasize that with them. So that's from what I've seen. But based upon the studies that I've seen done, usually you want to be within a 10 to 20% increase in overload. So let's say you have your regular game bat, your game weight, 10 to 20% would be overload, and then 10 to 20% of that weight for your underload. And there's been studies that have been done that have still shown an increase in bat speed for hitters who have gone up to 60, 70% overload, and then, swinging a fungo bat as well. I think for me, again, I think the most important thing is helping a hitter develop as a hitter. And so I want to make sure that their swing stays intact. And so one of the things that I've seen is you start swinging something way too heavy for a hitter who doesn't really know how to hit first. I've seen it hurt their movement a little bit. So I do try to stay within that 10 to 20% for that specific reason. Now, once a hitter knows how to hit, then I think, I think you can do a lot of different things with that. But for a lot of the majority of the hitters that are probably going to be listening to this, or coaches out there, that's why I'm pretty dogmatic on sticking with that 10 to 20%. You still may see some benefit in doing, heavier than that or lighter than that. That's just based upon, what I've seen personally. So overload, underload can be very beneficial, can be helpful, and it can help clean up some swing flaws as well, especially for some of the overload. I just would recommend, based on my own opinion, that the hitter has some functional strength before you start doing that. So bat speed is, it is important. Okay, we've listed a couple of the things so far as to why it is important. I mean, if you look at who has the highest bat speed in the major leagues in 2023, it is Giancarlo Stanton. So we can't say that, hey, the higher the bat speed you have, the better the hitter. No offense to Giancarlo. He's a much better hitter than I was, but he's not regarded as the best hitter in the major leagues. And so if you look at, the top 10, top 15 players who have bat speed, it's not necessarily the top 10, top 15 hitters in Major League Baseball. And so it's important to note that it's not necessarily, again, something that you have to obsess over. I want to believe Mike Trout was number 3, but again, Joey Gallo, number 4. And so there's some other good hitters on that top 10 list with Acuna and Judge, but I don't know who Sam Hillard is. Jake Bowers, don't know who he is. Cordero, don't know who he is. And so I don't want to say this to rip on these guys by any means, because again, they're in the major leagues. I'm here doing this podcast talking with you, but it just shows that the best hitters don't always necessarily have the highest bat speed. And so at the beginning of this, what we talked about, bat speed's probably a little bit overrated, and it's a little bit underrated too. And here's why I think it's a little bit of both. Okay. So if you take somebody like, let's take an example like Tony Gwynn. Let's say Tony Gwynn obsessed with bat speed, and he focused everything on just swinging the bat harder and faster and everything. That may have hurt him as a hitter, right? Because part of what makes Tony Gwynn was the fact that, he was able to hit, a lot of flares over the infielder's head and hit, if he started hitting balls a little bit harder, like maybe more of those are getting caught by the outfielders. And, maybe he doesn't have the same feel that he had as a hitter. And then, that may be, an extreme example, but there's other players even to this day in the major leagues who, aren't power hitters. And so you may say, well, what if we tried to increase their bat speed? Well, you could do that, but usually that's going to take, there's usually a give and take. So, okay, like if you want to give someone more bat speed, that's great, but you may be taking something away. And the reality is you're probably not going to just give someone more bat speed and now they become a power threat like a Giancarlo Stanton. Just doesn't work like that. So there's give and take with both. I just don't think it's something that you should necessarily obsess over, because you can be a really good hitter and not have a high bat speed. Now, I do think there is a threshold, right? I mean, you can't be swinging a wet newspaper if you're heading up to the plate and expect to hit 98. So there is a bare minimum. I just don't know if you need to necessarily obsess over everything that's bat speed related. And so I think that, in order to wrap things up, bat speed is important. Getting in the weight room is important too. Getting stronger is important too, and those play a part in bat speed. But it can be a little bit overrated in the sense that just because you have higher bat speed is not going to necessarily make you a better hitter. And so, yeah, you may see major league hitters online. They're focusing on bat speed. They're going and doing bat speed training. And heck, I mean, I do some bat speed training with some particular hitters that I work with. But you got to understand, those hitters, they know how to hit first. And so we want to make sure that if we're going to do bat speed training, let's say if I'm a high school coach, I think that there is some room for it, because, it's a different object than your game bat. And so it's like, okay, we're building speed here. And even if we're just taking dry swings, there's research that's been done that has shown that even taking dry swings, doing bat speed training has improved in-game or a player's regular game weight bat as well. But with that all being said, if you're going to do it as a coach, and maybe you supplement it. Going back to the analogy of the protein supplement earlier, maybe you supplement it. So maybe it's, one day here, one day there, you're doing bat speed training. Maybe you incorporate the bat speed training amongst some other things that you're doing. So that way you're like, yeah, you are motioning to hitters. It's important to move fast, but at the same time, we're not solely obsessing over nothing except bat speed. And I think that's what sometimes gets highlighted online, whether it's meant to or not, is it seems as if some people are focusing on nothing except bat speed and just pulling balls, and then others aren't. And so I think that there's a combination and room for both. And I think both can be very important. But it's important that you have some sort of plan instead of just, having players go through bat speed training and not really knowing exactly what to do. So I hope that helped. I'm going to put all the articles that I talked about today in the show notes. So if you want more information, if you want to dig even deeper, go for it. Like I said, I do work with hitters and do some bat speed training on my own. So if you're a coach out there, probably more specific for coaches, and you're interested in some sort of bat speed training, send me an email, and I might be able to help, or maybe I can come up with a program that you'd be able to do with your team. If you have any questions, put them in your email. Send me an email, jonesbaseballtraining@gmail.com, and good luck the rest of the season.